Hey guys, welcome to the Boardbreaker tier list. We are talking about board breakers in the Spright format. Last week we talked about hand traps, and as you can see, or maybe not because Duel and Logbird is behind my picture here, there are some cards we already discussed in the hand trap tier list, and some of them we will discuss in the Boardbreaker tier list. So let's first discuss what is a board breaker. A board breaker is a card that helps you break an already established board. So you are going second, the enemy has built a big board with Baron, with whatever, and you now need cards to break it, whereas the hand trap is used so your opponent cannot even establish this board. That's the difference between the two kind of cards. So let's look at our tier list. We have the same categories like we had last week. So meta is a card that I would consider putting in the main deck. It's super good. It's a good card to put in the main deck. Solid option is a solid option. You don't need it in the main deck, but it's one of the best board breakers. Niche is it can work against some decks, but not against the general meta. C is, yeah, you could consider it. It cannot be even called a niche card, and D is straight, don't put it into your deck. So let's start up with Forbidden Droplet, which you can get for 700 gems, which is an ultra rare in the pack that you can buy from the shop, so it's pretty cheap to get. And I think Forbidden Droplet is a really solid option. I would not say put it in every deck, but this can for sure break meta boards that we see right now, because the opponent cannot react to the activation of Forbidden Droplet. That's a very important thing. So Spright opponent cannot chain his Spright Elf to get value out of his graveyard, and can not negate this thing with his Spright Carrot. So that's the important thing. That's why Forbidden Droplet is so good. And another card on the list is also good, which we will look at later. The next card is Forbidden Shallot. Some of you might know the counterpart of this, Forbidden Lance, which is a card that is played in the TCG at the moment against Kashira. So this card, for you who do not know it, it targets an open monster on the field, and until the end of the turn the monster gets 400 attack. That's not the important part, but also its effects are negated. So it's basically like an effect Veiler, but in the form of a board breaker card. So what do I think of this? I think it's more in the C category, as let's look at this card and maybe a Dark Ruler No More, which we will discuss in a moment. Dark Ruler No More just negates the whole field, and this is one card, and this negates one monster, and this is also one card. So you can see where this becomes problematic. Or I think the fact is that this card is simply power crap. There are a lot more better cards in the game that are better in the current meta. This is a quick play spell, so that is like the only thing going for it, but I think in this meta it's not super important. So the next card is of course Triple Tactics Talents, my namesake card. I would say this is a meta card. This is one of the best cards in the current format and in the upcoming Tier Elements format. It's pretty clear why, because Spright always activates effects on your turn. In your main phase they can use their elf to get something back, they can use their carrot, can use their jet or their blue when they activate it with Spright Starter. They can negate you, they can do so many things. They have IP Masquerina. There is a lot going on in your main phase when you play against Spright, and there will also be a lot going on when Tier Element comes out, which mainly plays, or not mainly, but also plays in your turn a lot, especially in the main phase. So this is a very strong card, not only because you can activate it in the current meta pretty consistent, but the effects are also very good. And by the way, I would say the most useful mode is the look at your opponent's hand, grab one card and put it back into the deck, because you can look at the hand so you know what's coming up the next turn, and you can also choose the strongest answer that your opponent has, maybe his own board breaker, maybe he has a Droplet or a Dark Ruler No More, and you put it back into the deck. Super strong. And the good thing is, if it's not useful in the situation, then you can draw two cards, which is Pot of Greed, which is forbidden in all formats, or you can like steal a monster from your opponent, which is like Change of Heart. So this card is like 3 super strong effects in one card, which you can easily activate in the current and upcoming meta. It must be said that there will be metas where this card is not that great, but for now in the Spright meta, this is one of the best board breakers and best cards that you can use. Let's talk about enemy controller and the Yugi boomers of you like I am. Like I have my old deck right in front of me, you can see it right now, but there's also an enemy controller in there. It was a Monarch deck. Good old times. It was like, I don't know, 2012 or something. So enemy controller, for those of you who do not know, can change. It's a quick play spell, that's important, and it can change an enemy monster to defense position or attack position, or you can tribute one of your monsters and then take control of an enemy monster till the end of the turn. So basically a change of heart effect, but you have to tribute one of your monsters. I think in the current format it's not a super bad card, but it's not amazing as well. Like Change of Heart obviously does this job better, and changing the position of a monster, that's not super useful. So the next card many of you might not know, it's Ultimate Slayer, and the effect is that your opponent cannot activate a monster effect to this effect, and then you can send one of your extra deck monsters to the graveyard and then choose one of your opponent's monsters with the same like type, Ritual, XYZ, Link, and put it back into the deck. So that's pretty strong, and you also have to consider that you can send Elderly, Entity, and Tess, like the fusion card, which when it gets sent from the extra deck to the graveyard, you can destroy one card on the field. So if you play this in your extra deck, this is basically a spin one card back into your opponent's deck and destroy a card on top of that. And that's only for the cost of like taking one card out of your extra deck to the graveyard. So in the right circumstances, this can be a very good card. It's also an ultra rare, but I would say it's also a niche card, because to make this really great, you would need Elder, Entity, and Test in your extra deck, and mostly Labyrinth is using that with Dogmatica Punishment, and there are also many decks who cannot fit not useful extra deck monster in the extra deck. So I think this is more of a niche card, though it's pretty strong. Now we are coming to one of the best board breakers, which is Dark Ruler No More, which I would put here, and I'm inclined to put it here into meta, but let's keep it here in solid option. So I think Dark Ruler No More is one of the best classic board breakers, in a sense that it like negates the whole board, it deactivates the whole board, because like Triple Tactics Talents obviously does not negate the board or deactivate it, as does Forbidden Droplet. But Dark Ruler No More, your opponent cannot react to this card, and it's the same thing with Forbidden Droplet, that makes this card super strong again. And then until the end of the turn, every effect card on your opponent's field gets negated. So these cards are pretty much the same, you could say, but this is a quick play spell, but this has higher cost. So I think all in all, Dark Ruler No More is the better card, because you could draw a Dark Ruler No More and then just play it, though a Forbidden Droplet would need more tributes. A Forbidden Droplet can at least always tribute itself, but then you can only negate one monster, whereas a Dark Ruler can always negate the whole board. So Dark Ruler No More, super good card. I think crafting this is a good call, and you will not regret it. It's one of the best board breakers in the game. So this is a card that many of you might not know. It's also in the TCG at the moment very popular against Kashtira. It's Book of Eclipse. I will tell you what it does. Let me first put it here. I think it's a niche card. So it's a quick spell card, and when you activate it, all monsters on the field that can be put into face down defense position will get put into face down defense position. So no link monsters, that's important. And then at the end of the turn, you have to flip up every card, and for every flipped up monster on your opponent's side of the field, they draw a card. So it's basically a board breaker in the sense of you flip your opponent's monsters down, but not link monsters, and then you destroy them, and then you win the game or have a big advantage. So the problem is, if you like flip them down and you don't manage to destroy them, then he will draw a lot of cards, and then this card has backfired. So this is pretty good against Kashtira because of the zone locking, but I would say in our current format, these are way better. So this is a niche option. I mean, it's a quick play spell like Forbidden Droplet, and you only need this card. This is pretty good, but the problem is against Spright, you cannot flip down their Spright Elf, and Spright Elf is a pretty core card that can revive them something on your turn. So I think this is a niche option. It is a super rare, so it's more affordable than these three cards here, especially these two here, so that could be considered. Next card, also a Yu-Gi-Oh! Boomer card, Book of Moon. It just flips one card face down. It's also a quick play spell. So I think I will put this in the C category. I don't see a reason why you would ever play like a Book of Moon over a Triple Tactics Talents or over a Dark Ruler. It's just a worse card. Of course, it's a quick play spell. You can theoretically play it on your opponent's turn and flip something down that has some use, but I think this card gets power crept by a lot of other board breakers. So Harpy's Feather Duster, all of you know it, it destroys every spell and trap card on the field. This is always a good card in the sense that this is the best card at its job. And I think at the moment it's a niche card because there aren't a lot of back row decks like Labyrinth in the meta. And of course you could in theory use it against Runic. They have the Runic Fountain, they have all their spells. But the problem is, Runic Spright also by the way, but problem is of course they can just summon their Hugin and then protect them, the whole field from the Harpy Feather Duster. So that's why I think this is more of a niche option. So the next card, also a Yu-Gi-Oh! Boomer card, is Change of Heart, and this just came back from the ban list. It's also an ultra rare. I think this is a really solid option, a really good card, and obviously way better than Enemy Controller. By far not as strong as these two when it comes to breaking a board, because at the moment we don't have like a single super strong card that you have to take from your opponent. So let's imagine a Spright board. They have a Spright Elf, a Spright Carrot, a Spright Red. Of course it's helpful to like steal their Spright Elf, but it's not like Spright Elf, it's the ultra boss monster of the archetype. So in a format where there is like one big monster that is summoned that is super strong and that you cannot like kill or cannot get rid of, this is even stronger. But I still think this is a really strong card because you can take their monster, can use it, can use their Spright Elf, you can use their Spright monsters, maybe you play a Spright deck yourself and then you can link them away. Pretty strong card. So next is Mind Control, and I would put this also into C because I think that this gets power crept by the Change of Heart, because it also takes control of one of the monsters of your opponents until the end of turn. So same thing, but you cannot tribute it and you cannot attack with it, so it's strictly worse. Then we have Raigeki, and I think Raigeki is not a bad card. I would not put it into solid option, but more into niche category. In theory, it can destroy the whole Spright board, but of course there is often Carrot on the board, and so this doesn't work, and there are some other decks this is not especially great against. So not a bad card, but I would never put them over these two, or would never put them on my deck over these two. So I think it's a niche option against some decks. It can be great. So the next one, this is also a niche option. This is Super Polymerization. For those of you who don't know, you have to discard one card from your hand and then you can fuse, make a fusion summon with either monsters from your opponent's side of the field or from your side of the field, or both of them mixed. So this is mainly used in the branded Despia strategy. A common target is the Swamp Dragon, who needs, I think, 2 monsters with different attributes. So this is good to break a board if you are playing some fusion monsters in your extra deck, because then you can just fuse away their targets. And it's also important that your opponent cannot react to this card. So he cannot like, oh, I chain this and that. This card just goes through. Of course, you can Spright Carrot this card, but he cannot react with other effects to this. So this is a strong card when you have some fusion monsters in your extra deck, but most of the decks don't, and if they don't, you don't want to put some in there just for super polymerization. So for Brand Despia, this is a good card. I would say this is a solid option for Brand Despia, but for every other deck, it's more niche. So Lightning Storm is the next. You can also get this from the pack for 700 gems, and I think Lightning Storm is also a niche option. So this makes sense because Lightning Storm is basically Feather Duster or Raigeki in kind of one card, you could say. Problem is that many bots that are built at the moment are not built in attack mode, so this loses value. And then again we have the Harpy's Feather Duster argument, where you could say, okay, I can Feather Duster their Runic Spright board, but of course they can just negate it. So that's not an amazing card right now. It's more of a niche option. If you have it and don't have something else, use it, but if you have better options, use the better options. So the next, another Yu-Gi Boomer card is Dark Hole, as a super rare by the way, which is pretty cool, so it's pretty cheap. And I think Dark Hole is better than Raigeki. And I would say, I would put this maybe here. It's better than Raigeki in the sense that this can have an advantage destroying your own monsters, which sometimes makes sense. I think this is the better card right now, but also a card, I mean, it's cheaper, so you can substitute another card when you don't have it and use the Dark Hole, but I would say in the current format, not the best board breaker available. Better stick to these in the upper category, but nevertheless, a card you could use if you have it. So the next card is Swords of Revealing Lights, which for 2 turns flips your opponent's monsters face down. So it's kind of like this Book of Eclipse. Problem is that this stays on the field and then can get destroyed, so the effect then gets destroyed. So I think it's strictly worse than the book, but it's not a bad card, and it's also a rare, so you could use it if you don't have like this card or a Darkhold or a Raigeki, because you should have a Raigeki, you get it for free, but yeah, I think we can put it here. Then we come to Evenly Matched, which we talked about in the last video. I would love to put this card here. This card, in my opinion, in a best of 3 format is the best board breaker that you can have, because in a best of 3 format, if you like win the first game, then you know that most likely you will be the second to go in the second game. And then you can just side this in, have 3 evenly matched, and this can like destroy the whole board. This is like one of the best board breakers, the classical board breaker, I would say. But in our best of 1 format, I think this is merely a niche option, which you can play in trap decks like Labyrinth, because they benefit from having traps in their decks. Unfortunately, once Master Duel gets a best of 3 format, then you can see this here as one of the best board breakers, which everyone will have in their side deck. But for now, it's here. Infinite Impermanence as a board breaker, of course, that makes sense, because you can negate one of your opponent's strongest monsters on the board and then play through the board. And also, if you have set it, you can then negate the whole column, which maybe also negates a spell card, which is important on the opponent's field. So I think this is really a solid board breaker card. Not in the sense that it's more impactful than a Darkhold or Raigeki, but in the sense that this is not only a board breaker, as it is also a hand trap. So this is both in one, and therefore really, really good. So if we're only talking board breaker, so only the board breaking capabilities, then I will put this somewhere around here. But as this card can negate the board, or have the effect that the board doesn't even get built, and then also help in breaking it, I think putting it here is the right call. Then we have Dino Wrestler Pankratops, which I think just got to 3 or 2, I'm not quite sure. So you can summon this when your opponent special summons a monster, and then it has the quick effect that it can tribute 1 Dino monster itself and destroy 1 card on the field. I think this is a pretty solid card. I would put it somewhere around here, the Swords and the Darkhold. I think pretty solid, and it's also an ultra rare, so if you have it, you can put it in some decks, mainly of course Dino decks and Dinomorphia. That makes sense. Pretty solid option, but not like the best cards that you can use to break a board. So this card we put in D, not because it's bad, because we don't have it in Master Duel at the moment. And then we have Ra Sphere Mode, which you can summon by tributing 3 monsters from the opponent's side of the field. I would not put this in solid option, but I think it's better than Pankratops, because when we are talking about playing against Spright, most of the time the Spright board will have 3 monsters, an Elf, a Masquerina, and then most of the time a Negate, Red Carrot or Djinn Buster, so you can use it and tribute all of them. This is a good card. I think Lava Golem is an even better card. This only needs 2 tributes, so it's more versatile than the Ra Sphere Mode. Ra Sphere Mode is actually played in TCG at the moment, because Kashtira tends to build a board with 3 monsters that you can Ra Sphere Mode then. But here in Master Duel, I think Lava Golem is the better card, and I would also put this over the Swords. Then we have a Kaiju. This is representative of all the Kaijus that need 1 tribute, and I would say I would put this above Pankratops, but under Ra Sphere Mode, because there are many boards or many decks in Master Duel that only use 1 card right now. Exorcister comes to mind. So you will always or most likely be better off with a Lava Golem or a Ra Sphere Mode. And then we have the cards which I always said we won't talk about again, because these are like purely hand traps. Like Infinite Impermanence is a board breaker, of course, so is Evenly Matched. But yeah, Ash is not a board breaker, because if there is a board, you cannot say like, I Ash your whole board and your whole board is negated, like Dark Ruler no more does. So this is technically not a board breaker, and we already talked about it in the last video. So yeah, this is my tier list, and Now that we have made the hand trap tier list and the Boardbreaker tier list, I will upload a video in a few days where I show you the best staples you can craft in Master Duel, so you save gems, you have the best cards available that you need, and of course Boardbreakers and hand traps will also be included, so you can look forward to that. Thanks for being here. If you have any suggestions or questions or something else, put it in the comments, and I'm happy that you have stuck with me to the end. I hope we see each other in the next video, and until then, bye.